Wow, this was a special one. Spoilers. Under the Lake is the quintessential Troughton-era base under siege story. The Doctor and Clara find themselves in an underwater base in the... They discover that the crew is being attacked by what appear to be ghosts, and the story unravels from there. While they try to figure out what these creatures are, what they want, and how to avoid becoming specters themselves. One of the best aspects of this story is its characters. Each was distinct and memorable, and with a couple of exceptions, relatable. Morin was the original leader of the crew. And while at the beginning, Toby Whithouse, the writer of this episode, gave us glimpses of his character, he very shortly died and fell into the black dude dies first trope, which, weirdly enough, happened a couple weeks ago. I hope this isn't a trend. This left the role of leader up to Cass, a sharp, decisive woman who was described by the Doctor as the smartest person in the room when he wasn't there. Next we have Lun, who is her signing translator. Oh, wait, I almost forgot to mention. She's deaf. I'd almost forgotten to mention that because it's not one of her main character traits. While yes, the fact that she's deaf isn't ignored and later on it becomes a plot point, her inability to hear in no way impairs her or defines her character. My sister and mother watched a show called Switched at Birth, and it involves a lot of deaf people. And it does a very good job at going into the issues and the culture of people who cannot hear. But their deafness is always present. It's always defines their characters. It's how they react to it that differentiates the different characters. That's all good and well, but this, I think, is much more impressive because it's not what defines the character. She's just a character who happens to be deaf, and that is important. Anyway, back to Lun. His character was mostly tied to Cass, but in a good way. They shared a lot of chemistry, not necessarily romantic, but possibly. He was endearing and held an awful lot of screen presence. Also, I must commend the actor on being very funny, particularly in lines like,
"So who's in charge now? I need to know who to ignore."
That'd be me. Her.
O'Donnell was what Osgood should have been. A fan of UNIT and someone who knows who the Doctor is and desperately wants his approval, but it doesn't hang over her all the time. It's like, it's not what defines her. It's a defining trait, and they go into it pretty well, but it's not in your face obnoxious, and it doesn't make her seem like a sad human being. She didn't get that much screen time this week, so I'll talk more about her next week. Bennett is the scientist of the group, and has had to deal with both confronting the fact that ghosts are real and his own issues with cowardice. Like O'Donnell, he didn't have too much screen time in this episode, but based on the way that it will be split up next week, the Doctor, O'Donnell, and Bennett in one thread, and Clara, Lun, and Cass in another, I assume that we'll get to see a bit more of these characters later. Pritchard is the weak character. He is the only in it for the money type of guy, and he does not depart from that even a little bit. But he dies pretty quickly, so it isn't too intrusive. Now, I personally have trouble remembering people's names. It's really bad, particularly when it comes to one-story characters. I usually know them as girl whose dad talked about shoelaces while dying, guy who I thought was only in it for the money but turned out to be more interesting than that girl who ended up looking like something out of a Picasso painting, we should go, doctor, guy, and hey, who turned out the lights, guy. But I remembered Lun, Bennett, Cass, O'Donnell, and Pritchard. This speaks volumes about their characterizations, which is vital for a base under siege story. Now that we've spoken about the crew, let's talk about the base and why it's under siege. The crew of an underwater mining base in the year 2119 has found what appears to be an alien spaceship. Inside are mysterious markings, which later on even the TARDIS cannot translate. I love the sets in this episode. It's obvious that some of them were reused, but the way that they were decorated and altered, it makes it all seem very fresh, and it's Doctor Who really has never looked better. I always had an issue with the RTD era spaceships. They just seemed a bit too industrial and like modern, not sci-fi enough. Come on, this is Doctor Who. But yeah, no, these are some of my favorite sets in Doctor Who yet. I also loved the ghosts and their design. I didn't notice until Pritchard died that you could see into the back of their heads. When I did notice it, it was very creepy. It really fell into the uncanny valley and was executed brilliantly. While I did see the cliffhanger coming, It was really, really well done and was definitely a great, oh, moment. I'm struggling to find more to talk about this episode. There isn't anything really wrong with this story. In fact, it's shaping up to be a classic. But at the moment, there's not really much to talk about. I have a feeling we'll have a lot more to get into when we get into the second part. The threat was perfect. I love when we be in these scenes of, what is it? What do they want? Solving, and then, oh, drat, ghost, let's get out of here. You were always at the edge of your seat, and that's exactly what a good episode of Doctor Who is supposed to do. I was never pulled out by some stupid joke or moment that made me want to smack my forehead like Captain Picard, so that's good. If I had to pick an issue, I'd say it's Clara. I really didn't like her in the opening, the whole monsters, explosions, and how excited she was getting when she was seeing the knife in the wall. I mean, she wasn't thinking about the fact that that meant people were in danger or could be dying or dead. It was very out of character for her. Speaking of her, as much as I love the idea of Clara being the Doctor from Flatline, I don't want her to do this in this next episode. That leader spot belongs to Cass, and I want her to shine. Cass for the next companion. I give this episode an 8. Classic Doctor Who at its best without all the shaky sets. I'm really excited for next week's story, which this one seems to be kind of a sequel-ish to, and with how much Moffat loves wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, I'm surprised something like this hasn't been done before. Put down in the comments, what did you think of the episode? I try and reply to most. You're going to be getting another video from me on Wednesday explaining how the schedule is going to be shaking up for the next few months. I hope you enjoyed this video, Elizabeth, and I can't wait for your next one.